Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. I didn't do one of these last week because I was away, but back into it again this week. It's been a bit of a strange week, I think. Looking at the S&P here, the US market has been open for about an hour so far, and it's trading, to be honest, not a million miles away from where it was this time last week. So we've had a week of a cautious recovery, and it's sort of given it up overnight. I did do a trade on the NASDAQ earlier in the week. I bought it, I think it was Tuesday, so caught some of this move up, and it's been knocked back since. But I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting afternoon, even though it's perhaps not been the most exciting week. So if it's the first time you've attended these, welcome to it. I normally do it every Friday. I'm not sure if I'll be around next week, but let's see. And what we do, we'll talk about some of the major announcements we'll take a look at the markets, a mix of markets. So stock market's still a bit nervy, I'd say. The DAX has taken a bit of a beating. We'll take a look at this in a bit more detail. The dollar's had a bit of a move, or it did have a bit of a move yesterday, but overall a bit sideways. Crude oil, where's that? That's still a little bit sideways overall. But let's take a look at this in a bit more detail. Let's get the housekeeping done, then we'll make a start. So let's just do a risk warning. This presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Trading is risky. Okay, that's that. So next week's quite a busy week next week. On Monday, we've got US manufacturing and services PMI. That can normally add some volatility. How is various parts of the US economy doing? Wednesday, we've got UK inflation. We had the Bank of England interest rate decision yesterday, no change. Inflation still quite closely watched. Some people worried that inflation might come back as the year goes on because of tariffs. I do think that obviously that is an issue, I think. Then Thursday, we've got US GDP. So how is the US economy doing? Then late on in the day, on Thursday for me anyway, we've got Japanese inflation data. Then Friday, UK GDP. How's the UK economy doing? And then US personal consumer expenditure data, which is the Federal Reserve, the US central bank's preferred indicator for inflation. So that could be a big one next Friday, but hopefully I'll be here. I might be away again next week, but I might try and do the live stream anyway. Let's see. Anyway, so that's next week. Fairly busy week next week. Let's see what impact it has on markets. That's it. Let's jump into it. Let's have a look. Let's start off with stock markets as usual. We've had this big sell-off, obviously. This is the S&P. So the S&P hit all-time highs just over a month ago. 19th of Feb, all-time highs in the S&P. Up at 61.47 or thereabouts. Then we sold off to a week last Thursday, down to 5,500. So what was the loss there? It's about 10%, isn't it? 61.47 minus 5,500. Yeah, divided by 61.47. Yeah, we've had a 10.5% sell-off in the S&P off those highs. And the question is, as ever, when we have a big trend like we have for these US stock markets, is that the end of the trend, or is it just a pullback in the big trend? Now, for me, when the market breaks the trend line first time round, I don't believe it's the end of the trend. I give it one last chance. So I still think I'd still be looking to buy the dip, but the markets need to stabilise. I've talked a bit in the past about how most of my investing stuff is S&P and NASDAQ ETFs. I did sell out of some of those on the way down because I was getting a bit jittery. So I thought I'd offload some of those. But I'm waiting to get back in. But for me, I'm not convinced yet. So we've got this big uptrend in the S&P, sold off 10%. Let's see what happens. I think if it lurches back, what level would I think is a big level? Well, when we have broken through these old lows, from October, so those are big levels to break. 5,400, maybe the next big level. Let's see. Let's see what happens. But it's definitely a market that has had the confidence and the momentum knocked out of it over the last month. But what I think is interesting for this afternoon, if I tidy some of this up a little bit, this is the trend. This is the hourly chart. This had been the trend since last Thursday. So we had the low for the sell-off on Thursday. And then we did have a recovery into Wednesday. It's all gone a bit sideways since then. But for me, the trade I would do this afternoon, I'd be a buyer. And think, okay, I'm still not that convinced that perhaps the longer term slide is over. But I'm a buyer wondering, are we going to have a run back to the highs from Wednesday? So that for me is the trading idea for this afternoon. To see we've got these lows from Tuesday, these in-session lows from Tuesday at 55.97 on the S&P. These have held so far. Let's see what happens. So I think it's still an interesting afternoon, but you can see, it's been a bit of a scrappy old week. But that's where we are on the S&P, and that's my thinking at the moment. So I'm not yet convinced we've seen the worst. I do think for me the big trend is still up, despite that trend line breaking. In the short term, perhaps we'll get a bounce back up to the highs for the week, but it's still a nervous market. So I think it's a very different market here compared to what we had, from October 2023 all the way up, I think anyway. So let's see what happens. So for me, that's perhaps the trade for this afternoon is the one I'll be looking at. If we take a look at the Nasdaq, it's the same on the Nasdaq, isn't it? If we pick up on the trend from those 2023 lows again. There you go, like something like that. So it has had a little poke below the trend line. Is at the end of the trend. Again, like I say, I'd give it a chance. Give it a chance to see what happens. So it is, an interesting time at the moment. Big slide in the Nasdaq from 22.2 down to 19.1. What's that? 3,100 points. So 15%, almost. Slide in the Nasdaq. Let's see what happens there. And again, there's a similar setup for the Nasdaq for this afternoon. It's sold off. It has held above. Tuesday's low is actually down here somewhere. There we go. 19,378 is Tuesday's low, in session low. Let's see if that holds this afternoon, and we get a push up. Let's see what happens there. So that's my trade for this afternoon. Everything else, well, look at the FTSE. I am in a FTSE trade. And it's all a bit sideways. I've been long the FTSE for a couple of weeks now, and it's been up a bit and it's been down a bit, and it's all a bit sideways. But again, the big trend in the FTSE is still up. The DAX, the big trend in the DAX is still up. It's sold off the last couple of days, but if we pick up on the big trend, and of course the move this year, so the DAX, I would be a buyer of the dip in the DAX. It's dipping at the moment, so that's one for next week. We have seen this 22,100 zone from the third week of Feb has held the DAX up. So for me, if we had a deeper sell-off next week, that perhaps looks interesting. But it's I do feel, there's a lot going on day to day. This is not much direction, is how I felt this week. I did that Nasdaq trade. I did buy heating oil this week. I'll talk about that. But there's not a lot. But again, doing nothing is as much a decision as doing something. Japan, I would have gone short. Perhaps it's one for next week. I did go short the other week, came out of it for a profit. The Nikkei, so had been sideways, then started breaking down in late Feb. The markets rallied back. I'd be a seller. I would be a seller, and I'd put a stop above 38,500. So the Nikkei is going the other way to some of these other markets. So I think that's maybe interesting. So I'll be looking for perhaps a run back to at least 36,000 on the Nikkei. So that's that. But an interesting time in stock markets. Fairly inconclusive as far as I'm concerned. But let's see what this afternoon brings, whether we can get some sort of recovery in these US markets to have a look at the highs from earlier in the week. But so far we're a little bit chopperama, I think, as markets have been underway for about an hour now. So that's that stuff. Let's talk about gold. Gold's got a bit of a hit. Anyway, All-time highs. That moved through 3,000 in gold. What a performance it's been for gold this year. Where did gold end last year? So gold ended last year at 26.24. So we're up $400 or so on the year. So about 15% for the year so far. I would be a buyer of the dip in gold. You know, we've seen a lot of strength there. This level, just before we went out to all-time highs again, that would be the closest I'd want my stop at the moment. The other side of 29.78, 29.80, the lows from mid-March. But I'd absolutely be a buyer of the dip on gold, you know, because this is a strong trend, and I want to go with the strong trend. So, yeah, not much else to say about that. Maybe an interesting week next week if we see this under a bit more pressure. Where does it stabilise next week? Silver, don't look at that very often, but I mean the trend is up. It hasn't taken out the highs from October, you know, but you know, I'd be a buyer of silver, but I prefer to trade gold. I think gold has got the clearer trend out of the two. So that's that. Let's look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin, I mean, it's just a bit boring, Bitcoin, isn't it? You know, it's a bit drifty, I'd say, Bitcoin, for much of this year. So we had a new low for the year last week. The big trend is absolutely up. So from a longer term point of view, I'd be a buyer of the dip. You know, I'd probably want a stop at the moment. If I was a buyer now, at least the other side of 76,000, but probably more likely the other side of like 66, whatever these lows are, 65 down there. I mean, the big trend is absolutely up. It's just been sliding for the past, what's it been? A couple of months or so. So not too exciting there. I'll talk about copper as we had a look at gold. I'm in the trade on copper. I think I bought copper in here somewhere, about 460. And that's interesting. You know, that we've had a good trend in copper. I'm in the trade. I've got a trailing stop on the trade. I was wondering, is it going to break out? These are the all-time highs in copper from May last year, around about 516. So that's perhaps a bit of an interesting market for next week. Let's see. Let's see what happens with copper. But that trade has been okay. Yeah, let's see what happens there. An interesting move in copper. The big trend on copper, again, over the years is up. It hasn't done much over the last 12 months. Let's see if this time is any different and if it can break through those old highs. I should say, of course, if there's any markets you want looking at, if you put it in the chat, and we'll take a look at those when we've done all that. Oil, boring. You know, the hourlies on oil, that's what it looks like over the last 2 weeks or so. You know, we're in a definite range. It had a look through the top of the range on Tuesday, fell back in, had a look again yesterday, and it's fallen back in. But maybe this is the time we get the breakout. I don't know, but pretty sideways overall. But on the daily charts, and if you wanted to be a long-term buyer of oil, then this is the place to buy. You know, if you thought oil was going to go up, down at these levels, this has been support for like 3.5 years, $62 to $65 a barrel. It's been a big level for oil. You can see it now on the dailies. It's been a fairly uneventful March. But these are big levels, you know, so it's interesting to see what happens down here. A little bit boring, like I say, day to day, all a bit sideways, but an interesting market to watch. Let's see if it wakes up. Heating oil. I did the trade on heating oil this week. I thought this was an interesting trade. It's slightly ahead at the moment. I think I bought it at 223. But, excuse me. In heating oil, we'd had this big, this is the daily chart. We'd had this big downtrend going back to June 22. So we're 2.5 years into that, or we were. It sort of broke out last year, rallied, and pushed up near the old highs from July 2024. Sold off. So I bought it. So I just wondered, is this then a change in trend? Market rallies, sells off, and bang, up we go again. That was my thinking behind the heating oil trade. A bit of bullish divergence on the RSI for those people who are fans of that. So I bought into heating oil this week. Wide stop, the other side of these lows, the other side of 2. And really just to see, does this market run all the way back up to 265 and break out? Or does it just plop and break through those lows? Let's see. I thought it was an interesting trade to do. So I'm in that trade. Yeah, that's it. The dollar, let's take a look at that. And we did have a bit of excitement this week. Again, you can see, look how tight. This is the daily range. the last couple of weeks on the dollar index. Look how tight it's been. And of course, that has an impact on other markets, so other markets become a little bit boring too. But I did wonder, I run a WhatsApp group, and I mentioned it in the WhatsApp group a couple of times over the last few weeks. You know, is this where the dollar makes a base? We've had a big sell-off from the highs, again, driven, I think, very much by the new political regime in the US and tariffs and all of that. You know, it peaked at 110 and a bit in Jan, and we've been as low as 103 and a bit, you know, so it's dropped 700 points since Jan. These old November lows were important on the way up. Let's see if they're important again now. But again, a bit like oil, all a bit sideways. This is the hourly chart we're looking at now. Let's see if we get the breakout this week, next week, rather, in oil. In the dollar index. So of course that feeds into other markets. You know, if you look at, because the dollar index has been weak, we've seen strength in the pounds. You know, the good run in the pounds off the Jan lows. The euro, a good run there, but these have all stalled as the dollar has stalled a bit over the last couple of weeks or few days. So yeah, a little bit boring and a little bit wait and see to see what happens there. What else do we want to look at? There's not a lot. There's bits going on in commodities. I mean, live cattle, we've looked at this before. Live cattle has broken out. So, I mean, that's been a great trend. Going back to, I could draw that trend line a bit better, but I've got the trend back here to June 21. So we're 3.5 years into that trend. The price of cattle has almost doubled, not quite doubled, in the last 3.5 years. But I thought this was interesting. We had the breakout in Jan, sells off, almost textbook, comes back, retests the old breakout, and bang, off we go again. And here we are, all-time highs in the price of cattle. Everything else is a little bit sideways. Coffee's calmed down. We had that crazy run in coffee into middle of Feb, bit sideways since then. Cotton, I'd still be a seller of cotton. The trend is down in cotton. We've had a rally, and it's slipped back again. So nothing too exciting going on there. So that's it. It's a bit of a mixed bag, I'd say, at the moment. So interesting markets for next week. Gold, I think, because the trend has been up. We had all-time highs yesterday. It's selling off today. I'd be a buyer of the dip, so I think that's interesting. But for me, you know, most of my focus is still very much US markets. And the theme for today, do we get a rally off those old lows? Well, it is holding so far. The Tuesday lows are holding so far. How does that work out? And then going into next week, do we manage to get more of a breakout? You know, and that would definitely start to add some weight to the argument that perhaps, you know, we have seen the worst of the downtrends. That's that. Yeah. There's no chat today. I've either put everybody to sleep or everyone's on holiday today. So I'm gonna wrap this up fairly quickly, I think. So for me, US indices, the one to watch next week, and gold, and oil, and see what happens. Lots of data coming out, so we'll see how it is. A quick plug: I run a WhatsApp group. I run it for 2 years now. I do a daily update, markets I'm watching, trades I'm running, trades I'm doing, all of that sort of stuff. Q&A. If you sign up, the link is in the description, and you use the code YouTube. You can try it out for a month, get 20% off. It's only a month-by-month subscription, and you get access to me all day long, and we talk about markets and have a look at any interesting stuff out there. If you want to find out who I trade with, go to bit.ly/David Trade. Again, that link is in the description. I like that because I can link it in to TradingView, tight spreads, small trade sizes, which is always good, I think, if you're new to trading. So try those out. And any questions, feel free to drop me an email, dj@davidjonestrading.co.uk. Someone said Hungarian stock Opus. Thank you for that. So I don't think I'm just shouting into the void. Is Opus? Do you know what? I haven't got it. Is it Opus? Is it one of these? Opus share? I don't know. Is that the right one? On the BET. What's the BET? Is that the Belgian? I never know. BET exchange. Let me know if I'm looking at the right stock there, because I'm not sure that is the right stock. Let me have a look and see where it should be trading. Opus Hungarian stock. Global 5. Oh, that is the right stock. Yeah, the price is 562. Okay, that's the stock. What a great run. What do they do? Electronic technology. I mean, that's a fantastic trend, isn't it? That's gone absolutely nuts, isn't it? So since June 23, and it was trading at, I'm guessing, is this euros or not, or forints, Hungarian? I don't know, whatever. It was trading at 120, whatevers, and now it's trading at 564 a year and a half later. So for me, as a trend follower, I'd have to be a buyer of the dip, I think. The only question is, where does my stop go? So if I was a buyer, it's quite an interesting one, that. I would put a stop the other side of 480, 490, if I think that trend is going to continue. But that's had an incredible run, hasn't it? So that's an interesting stock. Never looked at those before. There we go. Yeah, trend is up. So I'd have to be a buyer, and I'd want my stop the other side. Pretty volatile though. I mean, what's it done this year? It's been as low as 500, as high as 650. So it's a 30% range pretty much this year. So it's a volatile stock, quoted in forints. Thanks for that. Yeah, but the trend is up. So I think I'd have to be a buyer. But otherwise, we're going to wrap it up there. So like I say, any questions, drop me an email, dj@davidjonestrading.co.uk. I'm going to have a look at these US markets this afternoon, see if there is a trade in there. What does it look like at the moment? Yeah, I could be tempted to be a buyer with a stop the other side of 55.90 or something on the S&P. And on the NASDAQ, what's the level on the NASDAQ? 19,378. So it's holding so far. Let's see what the rest of the day looks like. Otherwise, we'll wrap things up there. So I should be back next week, maybe. If you haven't subscribed, if you could click on subscribe, click on like, all the usual YouTube stuff. And I will see you next Friday. But in the meantime, good luck with your trading.